I had just signed the final document that ended 40 years of my life's work. My biotech company, Helios Biosystems, had been officially sold for $90 million. The lawyer's handshake was firm, the ink was dry, and for the first time in decades, my calendar was empty. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow. Maybe that's why when my daughter Chloe called that evening and said, "Dad, let us take you out to celebrate," I didn't hesitate. We made a reservation at the Alabaster Room, the most expensive restaurant in Dallas. They insisted on choosing the place, and I didn't argue. After all, what could possibly go wrong when you're celebrating success with your only daughter and her husband? The restaurant glowed like polished gold when I arrived. The maitre d' greeted me by name, and a waiter in a perfectly pressed vest led me to a table near the window overlooking the city skyline. Chloe stood up to hug me, her perfume faint and familiar. Her husband, Dylan Cross, smiled with that slick charm that always seemed rehearsed. "To the man who built an empire," he said, raising a glass of wine before I'd even sat down. I smiled politely. "It wasn't an empire, Dylan. Just a good company with good people." "Don't be modest," he said, leaning forward. "Everyone in biotech knows Helios. You've changed the field." Chloe touched his arm gently, laughing. "You should hear him, Dad. He's been talking about your legacy all day." Legacy. That word hung in the air. Ellen, my late wife, used to say, "Legacy is what's left after the applause fades." I hadn't thought about that word in years. The waiter poured our wine, an aged Cabernet I could never pronounce. Dylan watched him with a kind of restless energy, tapping his thumb against the glass. Chloe was quieter than usual, eyes darting to her phone, then back to me. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe she wanted the evening to go perfectly, or maybe she already knew it wouldn't. For a few minutes, everything was pleasant. We talked about travel, retirement, and old memories. Chloe told me she wanted to take me to Italy before I get too old to walk those cobblestone streets. Dylan made a joke about hiring a private jet. I laughed, but something in the tone felt wrong, too smooth, too deliberate. I had learned long ago that charm without authenticity was just manipulation in a tuxedo. When my phone vibrated, I excused myself. "That'll be the Swiss bank confirming the transfer," I said, half joking. I stood adjusting my jacket and stepped toward the marble hallway leading to the lobby. The sound of conversation faded behind me. My heart was light, almost relieved. $90 million. Ellen would have been proud. I was free to live quietly now, to read, to garden, to breathe. The call was quick, efficient, emotionless. "Mr. Trent, we confirm the transaction has cleared. Congratulations." I thanked them, then hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. That's when I saw him, the young waiter from earlier. He was barely 25, clean-shaven, uniform immaculate. But his hands were shaking. He stepped into my path, voice trembling. "Mr. Trent, sir, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you something." My instincts sharpened. Decades of boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, and betrayals had taught me how to read people. The fear in his eyes wasn't faked. "What is it, son?" I asked calmly. He glanced around as if terrified someone might hear him. "Your daughter. When your son-in-law asked about the art on the wall, she took something from her purse, a small vial. She poured a white powder into your wine. For a second I thought I'd misheard." "What?" "She poured it fast, sir, while you were distracted. Then she swirled it and hid the vial in her napkin." I stared at him, my pulse thudding. "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir, I swear it." I didn't want to say anything, but I saw it. My mind raced. Poison number 2, Messi. This wasn't murder, it was strategy. The kind that doesn't end a life, but dismantles it. The kind that makes you question your own mind. My blood turned cold, but I didn't show it. 40 years in business had taught me one rule: never react until you understand the game. "Thank you," I said quietly. I slipped $500 from my wallet and placed it in his hand. "You didn't see anything. But if you ever need help, call this number." I gave him my personal card, the one without titles or company names. "Now go. Forget this conversation." He nodded, eyes wide, then vanished into the kitchen corridor. I stood there alone for a moment, letting the truth sink in. My daughter. My Chloe. She had always been bright, stubborn, impulsive, but never cruel. What could make her do this? And Dylan, he was behind it. I could feel it in my bones. Ellen had warned me years ago. "He doesn't see Chloe, Michael. He sees your company." I smoothed my jacket, straightened my tie, and forced my heartbeat to steady. The CEO in me took over. No emotion, no panic, strategy. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. A performance convincing enough to make them believe they'd already won. When I walked back to the table, Chloe looked up, smiling too brightly. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Just business," I said, settling into my chair. The lawyers wanted to confirm a few things about the sale. Dylan chuckled. "Even on your big night, huh? Some things never change." "Some things shouldn't," I replied. The waiter returned with our entrees. Perfect timing. The table gleamed silver cutlery, crystal glasses, the scent of truffle and rosemary. I stared at the two identical glasses of red wine in front of me. I could feel the weight of choice pressing on my chest. I picked up my glass and studied it. The liquid shimmered innocently in the candlelight. "Dad?" "You look lost," Chloe said lightly. "Just thinking about legacy," I murmured. Then I moved. It was a small, precise gesture disguised as an accident. I knocked over my water glass. Ice spilled across the white tablecloth, splashing both of them. Dylan cursed softly, reaching for napkins. Chloe gasped and grabbed her clutch to avoid the spill. In the confusion, I switched the wine glasses. "God, I'm clumsy," I said, dabbing at the mess. "Guess I'm not as sharp as I used to be." Dylan forced a laugh. "You're fine, old man. Just relax." Chloe smiled, faintly unaware. She was now holding the glass meant for me. We toasted again, to family, to new beginnings. She lifted her glass, took a confident sip, and smiled. "To Dad, the man who built it all." I echoed softly. "To family. And to getting what we deserve." For the next 15 minutes, I barely touched my food. I listened as Dylan bragged about new investments, his voice dripping with arrogance. Chloe laughed at every joke, but I was watching her. The first sign came subtle, a flicker in her eyes, a faint tremor in her hand, as she reached for her fork. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you ever feel like the lights are too bright?" Dylan frowned. "What?" She blinked, confused. "It's just the room. It's spinning." "Maybe slow down on the wine," he muttered, forcing a smile. But she was already swaying, her words slurred, her fingers trembling. "Dylan, I don't feel..." Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed against her chair. The restaurant froze. Silverware clinked, conversations died. I stood up, my voice sharp but perfectly pitched for panic. "Someone call 911. My daughter, she's not breathing right." Dylan just stared at her, pale, speechless. I grabbed his arm. "Call them, damn it." He stammered something about medication, anxiety, embarrassment, trying to control the narrative even now. But it was too late. The waiter from earlier, the young man with the shaking hands, was already dialing. I knelt beside Chloe, holding her hand cold and limp in mine. My face looked like grief. Inside it was something else, resolve. Justice was already in motion. When the sirens echoed outside, I looked up at Dylan. His mask was cracking, fear creeping through the cracks of arrogance. He didn't know how much I knew. He didn't realize the old man he tried to destroy had just outplayed him at his own game. As the paramedics rushed in, I whispered under my breath so quietly no one could hear, "This isn't revenge, son. This is revelation." The night after the collapse was a blur of flashing ambulance lights, cold hospital corridors, and questions that no one could answer fast enough. I followed the gurney as they wheeled Chloe through the emergency doors, her pale hand slipping from mine. Dylan walked behind me, his phone glued to his ear, muttering explanations to someone who clearly wasn't the police. He wasn't panicking like a husband whose wife had just collapsed. He was calculating. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in corporate boardrooms right before someone tried to bury bad numbers under good excuses. A nurse stopped me before the trauma bay. "Sir, you can't go in yet." "I'm her father," I said, voice tight. "I understand, but please wait. We need space to work." Through the glass, I saw the doctors move with precision, their voices clipped and controlled. Chloe lay still under the harsh fluorescent lights. I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Dylan. He stood off to the side, watching the door like a man waiting for an opportunity, not for his wife to wake up, but for the story to start going his way. When Dr. Chen came out 20 minutes later, his expression was grim but calm. "Mr. Trent, your daughter is stable for now. We're running a toxicology screen to identify what caused her reaction." "Toxicology?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, it wasn't alcohol or food poisoning. Something in her bloodstream isn't right. Dylan jumped in before I could speak. "She's allergic to shellfish." I told them that. "We were having scallops. This must be some cross-contamination." Dr. Chen gave him a long, skeptical look. "Her airways aren't swollen. This isn't an allergic reaction. It's neurological." Dylan's face drained of color. "Neurological? What do you mean?" "It means," Dr. Chen said flatly, "someone gave her something that affects the brain. We're testing for sedatives, antipsychotics, or other compounds. We'll know soon." He turned to me. "You can see her in a few minutes, Mr. Trent. She's unconscious but stable." I nodded once. Dylan's phone buzzed again. He stepped away to answer it, whispering furiously. I stood there watching him, the pieces clicking together in my mind like a lock turning. The vial, the powder, the switch, the collapse. It all fit perfectly, except for one question: why I didn't wait for permission. I walked into the trauma bay. Chloe lay there, tubes and monitors attached, her skin almost translucent under the light. For a moment, the father in me broke through the strategist. She was still my little girl, the one who used to run barefoot through the backyard chasing fireflies with Ellen. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You picked the wrong glass, sweetheart," I whispered. "But maybe that's what saved us both." Behind me, the curtain rustled. Dylan's voice was low, furious. "You stupid." He stopped when he realized I was there. The mask snapped back on. "I mean, this is crazy, right? They're saying it might be drugs. She doesn't even take medication." I turned to face him. "Then how did something get into her system?" He blinked. "I don't know. Maybe someone spiked her drink. Maybe it was that waiter." I stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the weight in my stare. "Careful, Dylan. You're better at lying when you've had time to rehearse." He froze, mouth open, but silent. Then he forced a laugh. "You think I had something to do with this? My wife is lying there half dead and you're accusing me?" "I'm not accusing," I said evenly. "I'm observing." "Of what?" "That you're sweating more now than when she collapsed." He took a step back, shaking his head. "You're losing it, old man. You've been stressed about the sale, the money, it's affecting you. Chloe told me you've been forgetting things lately." There it was. The narrative. They'd been preparing it for months. "You're trying to paint me as senile," I said quietly. "That's the plan." He smirked too quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." I leaned in, whispering so only he could hear. "You tried to make me look unfit. You poisoned me to take control of the estate. But you got sloppy." Before he could respond, Dr. Chen returned holding a clipboard. "Mr. Trent, can I speak with you privately?" Dylan moved to follow, but the doctor held up a hand. Just him. We stepped into the hallway. Dr. Chen lowered his voice. "The toxicology report is back. It's olanzapine, a very strong antipsychotic, not a recreational drug. In a dose this high, it can mimic a stroke." I felt my stomach twist, even though I'd expected something like this. So it wasn't an accident. He looked at me carefully. "No, it wasn't. I've already contacted the authorities. But before they arrive, I want to ask, do you know anyone who might have given her this?" I looked through the glass at Dylan, pacing on his phone again. "Yes, doctor," I said. "I do." When I turned back, Dr. Chen was watching me with a faint frown. "You seem very calm for a man who just found out his daughter was poisoned." "I've had 3 hours to process it," I said, "and 30 years to learn patience." He nodded slowly, maybe realizing that whatever this was, it was bigger than a family dinner gone wrong. The next morning, the police interviewed both of us. Dylan played the part of the concerned husband, spinning stories about Chloe's anxiety medication stress. I didn't contradict him, not yet. I let him build his house of lies higher and higher, because I knew exactly how I'd pull the foundation out from under it. After they left, I went home. The house felt different now. Smaller, quieter, heavier. Ellen's photo still sat on the mantel, smiling that knowing smile. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring at the morning sunlight spilling across the floor. That's when I saw it, an envelope lying half open on the counter. The return address was Unfamiliar Cross Exports, LLC. I slid the paper out. Inside was an invoice for consulting services medical transport coordination. $310,000. Signed by Dylan Cross. It wasn't just about inheritance. He was laundering money through my old company's logistics network, using Helios's reputation, my reputation, as a shield. No wonder he'd been asking about the shipping routes and the audit. The sale triggered a federal review, something that would expose every illegal shipment he'd hidden under my corporate license. He wasn't trying to steal my money. He was trying to bury evidence. The phone rang. I picked it up without looking at the caller ID. "Michael Trent," I said. "Mr. Trent," a smooth voice answered. "This is Alexander Rhodes. I handled your company's acquisition contract. I heard about the incident. I assume you need counsel, Rhodes." A name I hadn't heard in years, but one I trusted. He was more than a lawyer, he was a strategist. "Yes," I said, "and not for business, for war." I told him everything, the vial, the waiter, the switch, the hospital, the drug, the invoice. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said quietly, "You realize what this means?" "Yes," I said. "It means I'm not the victim. I'm the last obstacle." Rhodes exhaled slowly. "Then let's make sure you stay that way." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker like static. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. For years I'd built my life around order logic control. I thought betrayal came from competitors, from rivals, from strangers who wanted what I had. I never thought it would come from my own blood. At 2 a.m., I poured myself another coffee and opened the laptop. I began pulling every document, every financial transfer linked to Dylan or his company. Each line of data was a confession waiting to be read. As I worked, Ellen's voice came back to me, soft and steady, as if she were standing behind my chair. He doesn't love her, Michael. He loves what she inherits. By dawn, I had a digital trail that could bury him, payments to Dr. Adler, offshore accounts, fabricated shipping receipts. Enough to destroy his empire before it ever truly began. But I didn't send it to the authorities. Not yet. This wasn't just about exposing him. It was about making sure he understood why he lost. When I finally closed the laptop, the first light of morning spilled through the blinds. I stood up, stretching my back, and looked out over the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere out there, Dylan was already awake, calling his lawyer, planning his next move, believing he still had control. He didn't realize he was already playing my game now. And for the first time since Ellen died, I felt something close to peace. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, but the kind that comes from clarity. I looked at her photo on the mantel and said softly, "You were right, Ellen." He never saw Chloe. He only saw a safety net. But now he's going to see what happens when the net fights back. Morning light poured through the blinds of my study, cutting across stacks of papers and the half-empty cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe collapsing at the table, the glass slipping from her hand, the look of shock frozen on her face. I wasn't haunted by guilt. I was haunted by clarity. I finally understood just how far Dylan was willing to go. The city outside was just waking up, but I had already been awake long enough to make peace with what had to come next. My phone buzzed a message from Rhodes. "Meet me at my office. We'll make it official." I grabbed my coat, glanced once at Ellen's photo on the shelf, and whispered, "This one's for you." By the time I arrived downtown, Rhodes was already waiting. His office occupied the 35th floor, a wall of glass overlooking Dallas, sleek and sterile like the inside of a vault. He poured me a cup of coffee before I even sat down. "Your instincts were right," he said without preamble. "I've reviewed the bank transfers. Dylan's company, Cross Exports, has been laundering money through Helios shipments for at least 8 months. The purchase audit would have exposed him immediately." "He wanted me declared incompetent," I said flatly. "That way, he'd control the assets and delay the audit long enough to bury the evidence." Rhodes nodded, fingers steepled. "Smart, but sloppy. The kind of arrogance that leaves fingerprints." He turned the monitor toward me. On the screen were rows of financial transactions, shell companies, consulting fees, fake invoices, all connected by a single pattern. "This isn't just inheritance fraud," he said. "It's interstate financial crime. That means federal jurisdiction." I leaned back, letting the information sink in. "So he's not just a thief. He's a criminal in a suit." Rhodes smirked. "You didn't build a $90 million company by missing patterns, Michael. Now it's your turn to use that brain for war." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside are 3 steps, freeze mirror trap. We freeze his accounts by filing a preemptive motion citing asset risk. We mirror his own petition, meaning if he's planning to claim you're unfit. We file proof that he's been manipulating evidence. And then we trap him. Let him walk into court thinking you're senile, then hit him with the facts. I opened the folder. "You've done this before?" Rhodes smiled thinly. "Not with family. But greed looks the same no matter the surname." The plan was brutal in its simplicity. It wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. I didn't want Dylan in prison. I wanted him in the light, unable to hide behind lies. "I want the hearing public," I said. "No sealed records. If he wants a show, we'll give him one." Rhodes's eyes glinted. "Understood." He reached for the phone and made a quick call. "Hale, it's Rhodes. We're activating the federal contact. Cross Exports. I want everything, licenses, offshore accounts, customs records, the works." "Yes, now." He hung up, then looked at me. Special Agent Marcus Hale, retired FBI, but still owes me a favor. He'll dig faster than any private investigator. I nodded. Good. I want Dylan to feel the walls closing in before he even realizes I'm the one building them. Rhodes leaned back, studying me. You know most men your age would let the law handle it. Why not you? Because this isn't just law, I said quietly. This is legacy. He didn't argue. He just poured more coffee. When I returned home, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the dining table where it had all begun. The tablecloth had been replaced, the broken glass long cleaned up, but I could still see it the moment Chloe lifted that glass, the trust leaving her eyes. I checked my phone. A new message blinked across the screen. Unknown number, Dad. Please don't hate me. I didn't know what he planned. I stared at it for a long time. The words should have brought relief, but instead, they hollowed me out. Didn't know it was the easiest lie to tell yourself when you didn't want to see the truth. I typed a reply, then deleted it. There were no words left that could bridge what she'd done. At noon, Rhodes called again. We found something you need to see. I drove back to his office. This time, Special Agent Hale was waiting, a tall man with graying hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He nodded politely and spread several files across the table. Your son-in-law is sitting on $3.2 million in debt, he said. Most of it owed to a company called Iron Vault Gaming. It's a front for a European betting syndicate. But here's the catch, it's owned by another entity, MedEquity Holdings, based in the Caymans. Let me guess, I said. Cross Exports is the parent company. Hale smiled grimly. Exactly. He owes himself money. That's how he keeps the illusion of liquidity. When Helios sold, he saw a chance to inject real cash and pay off his own fake debts before the audit exposed him. Rhodes crossed his arms. He's brilliant in the way that all stupid men are. He mistakes complexity for intelligence. I exhaled slowly. And Chloe? She's clean legally, Hale said. Morally, that's between you and her. I nodded once. Then, let's move forward. That evening, I sat by the window, laptop open, reviewing the plan Rhodes had drafted. Step by step, line by line. Freeze mirror trap. It felt clinical, detached, like an operation I'd performed 1,000 times in business. Except this time, the target wasn't a rival company. It was my own blood. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I opened my notebook and began writing notes, statements, timelines. Evidence wasn't enough. I needed control. I needed to know how every piece would fit together when the time came. Halfway through, I paused. On the wall opposite me hung a photograph Ellen and Chloe taken years ago on our last family vacation. Chloe was 17, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, both laughing. Ellen had written on the back, "She has your stubbornness, Michael. Teach her how to use it for good." I stared at it for a long time before closing the notebook. When the phone rang again, I answered immediately. "It's Hale," the voice said. "We traced another account. Dr. Adler just received a transfer of $250,000 from Cross Exports this morning. The memo line says, 'Final payment.'" I closed my eyes. "He's tying up loose ends." "He knows she talked. Then you'd better move fast," Hale said. "I already am," I replied. "Tell Rhodes to schedule the hearing tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I walked outside onto the porch. The night air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of pine. For the first time in months, I felt steady, focused. The fear, the betrayal, even the grief, they'd all crystallized into something stronger. Dylan thought I was old, predictable, slow. He thought experience was weakness. He'd forgotten that experience doesn't dull the blade, it sharpens it. I looked out across the still water of the lake and whispered to the dark, Tomorrow I stop being the father he thinks he fooled. Tomorrow I become the man he should have feared. Behind me the house was silent, waiting. The file folders lay on the table, each one marked with his name. The trap was ready, the bait set, and for the first time since that night in the restaurant, I felt the old thrill again, the cold, clean precision of knowing I was in control. Ellen used to say, justice moves slowly. Maybe it does. But I'd spent 40 years learning how to make time move when I needed it to. And now time was on my side. The courthouse steps gleamed under the sharp Texas sun as I arrived the next morning. It was 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the hearing that Dylan thought would make him the legal guardian of my estate. The streets were already buzzing with early reporters, photographers pretending they weren't waiting for someone's downfall. Rhodes was beside me, immaculate in his charcoal suit eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. He handed me a folder. "You sure you want to do this in person?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. He planned to humiliate me publicly. It's only fitting he learns the truth the same way. Inside courtroom 3B, the air was heavy with the faint smell of coffee and paper. The bailiff announced the judge's arrival. Dylan and his lawyer, a young man with slick hair and a self-satisfied smirk, were already there. Dr. Adler sat in the front row, pale and sweating, clutching his briefcase like a shield. When Dylan saw me walk in, calm, steady, composed, his smirk faltered for just a second. That second was all I needed to know. He already felt the ground shifting. The judge entered, an older man with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics. "This hearing is in session," he said. "Case number 774B, petition for guardianship of one Michael Trent, filed by Mr. Dylan Cross." Dylan's lawyer stood first, putting on the performance of his life. "Your Honor," he began, "we're here today out of concern, not greed. My client's father-in-law, Mr. Trent, has shown alarming signs of cognitive decline in recent months. He's misplaced large sums of money, forgotten appointments, and just 2 nights ago caused a public disturbance at a restaurant. We seek guardianship only to ensure his safety and the stability of his finances." I could almost admire the confidence in his lie. Dylan nodded along, feigning concern, hands folded neatly on the table. I sat silently beside Rhodes, my expression blank, like an old man too dazed to follow the proceedings. "Thank you, Counselor," the judge said. "Does the respondent have representation?" Rhodes rose, his voice deep and composed. "Yes, Your Honor. Harrison Rhodes, representing Mr. Trent. And before we begin, may I ask that this proceeding be recorded for the public record?" The judge arched an eyebrow. "You expect new developments?" Rhodes smiled faintly. "I expect the truth." The judge gestured. "Proceed." Dylan's lawyer called his first witness. "We'd like to bring Dr. Adler to the stand." The doctor stood shakily, walked to the witness chair, and swore the oath. His hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. "Doctor, the lawyer said you've been treating Mr. Trent correct, yes?" Adler said, voice thin. "And in your professional opinion, what is Mr. Trent's condition? He displays confusion, paranoia, occasional memory lapses, symptoms consistent with early onset dementia." I lowered my eyes, pretending to fidget with a pen. The act was working. Dylan sat a little taller, his lawyer gaining confidence. "And would you say Mr. Trent is capable of managing his finances or making sound decisions at this time?" Adler hesitated. "No, he is not. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions." Rhodes stood unhurried. "Doctor, I have just a few questions." Adler swallowed hard. "Yes, you've treated Mr. Trent, you say?" "Yes. How long have you known him? About, be precise, Doctor." Adler blinked. "A week, maybe 2. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Rhodes nodded slightly, his tone still calm. "A week or 2. That's a rather short relationship to diagnose a man's mental capacity. Wouldn't you agree, I suppose? And were you compensated for your time?" Yes, for consultation. Rhodes picked up a sheet of paper. A consultation fee of $250,000 paid directly from Cross Exports to Adler Medical Consulting. Is that correct? Adler froze. The sound of his dry throat swallowing echoed in the silence. Yes, that's correct. Rhodes walked toward him. You were paid $250,000 for one consultation. That's generous. Tell me, doctor, do you usually receive 6 figures for diagnosing patients you've met twice? Adler's voice cracked. It was an advance for what Rhodes pressed. Adler looked at Dylan, who stared back, expression flat and cold. For confidentiality. Confidentiality, Rhodes repeated softly. You mean silence? The lawyer for Dylan jumped to his feet. Objection, relevance. The judge waved a hand. Overruled. Continue. Rhodes turned back to the witness. Doctor, isn't it true that 2 days before Mr. Trent's alleged episode, you prescribed a medication to Mrs. Chloe Cross? Olanzapine. Adler's lips parted. Yes. And isn't it also true that this medication in high doses can induce confusion and stroke-like symptoms in healthy adults? Adler's face was gray now. Yes. Rhodes leaned closer. And who instructed you to prescribe it? The courtroom held its breath. Adler's gaze darted between Dylan and me, sweat dripping down his temple. Mr. Cross, he whispered finally. He said it was to help his father-in-law relax. A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. Dylan slammed his fist on the table. He's lying. Rhodes didn't even look at him. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mr. Cross, would you like to respond to this allegation? Dylan's lawyer stammered something about miscommunication, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Your Honor, Rhodes continued, if I may submit additional evidence. He placed a flash drive on the clerk's table. This contains a recording from Mr. Trent's home security system. It includes a conversation from yesterday morning in which Mr. Cross admitted to transferring funds offshore through Helios shipping routes. The bailiff plugged in the drive. The audio played Dylan's voice, echoing through the speakers. He'll never know. He's too old to understand the paperwork. By the time the audit hits, it'll all be gone. The color drained from Dylan's face. He shot to his feet. You had no right to record. Rhodes cut him off. Correction. Mr. Trent had every right. It's his home. The judge's gavel struck once. Enough. He turned to me. Mr. Trent, do you wish to speak before I render my decision? I rose slowly. Every eye in the courtroom followed me. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady, the voice of a man who'd spent decades leading people through storms. My daughter was manipulated into believing I was losing my mind. My son-in-law saw an opportunity and took it. I built Helios on integrity, on truth. They tried to erase that with greed and poison. But you can't drug conscience, Your Honor. You can only delay it. The judge nodded, once expression unreadable. I'll review the evidence, but this much is clear, Mr. Cross. Your petition is denied. This hearing is adjourned pending federal investigation. The gavel struck again. Dylan's lawyer slumped into his chair, defeated. Adler buried his face in his hands. As the courtroom emptied, Rhodes turned to me. That was decisive. I nodded. Not final. He's cornered, and cornered men bite. We stepped outside. The reporters swarmed instantly, shouting questions about the biotech billionaire's betrayal. I ignored them, walking past the flashing cameras, past the noise. When we reached the street, Rhodes put a hand on my shoulder. The FBI will move fast now. He'll try to call you, maybe beg. Don't pick up. I smiled faintly. Oh, I'll answer. Sometimes silence isn't punishment enough. That night I sat by the lake again, the reflection of the courthouse lights still burning behind my eyes. For the first time, the water looked calm, not because the storm was over, but because I finally knew I could control where it landed. In the distance, thunder rolled. A storm was coming again, but this time it was mine to command. The news broke before noon. Every major outlet in Texas ran the same headline: biotech founder exposes son-in-law in courtroom twist. By lunchtime, my phone had already filled with voicemails from journalists, business partners, and old friends pretending they cared. I ignored them all. The only call I answered was from Rhodes. "They're rattled," he said. "Adler's cooperating. He's giving the Bureau names, dates, everything. And Dylan's still in denial. He's moved out of his house and into his lawyer's office. But he'll make a mistake. They always do when they realize they're losing control." I looked out at the lake, the water calm as glass. Then we let him make it. That evening I sat alone in the living room, the faint sound of crickets outside. Chloe's voice echoed in my memory, her laughter, her excitement when she'd first joined Helios as an intern years ago. I tried to remember that version of her, the one who believed in what we built, not the woman who'd watched her husband poison me. A knock broke the silence. I opened the door to find Evan, the young waiter. He looked nervous, but determined, a man who'd stepped into a story far bigger than himself. "Mr. Trent," he said, "Mr. Rhodes asked me to bring these." He held up a small folder. "Copies of my statement, sir. Signed and notarized." I gestured for him to come in. "You're brave to come here." He shook his head. "You saved my job, sir. Maybe my life. This is the least I can do." We sat at the kitchen table. His hands trembled as he spoke. That night, I almost didn't say anything. My manager told me to mind my business, but when I saw her pour that powder, something in me couldn't stay quiet. "You did the right thing," I said quietly. "The truth has a way of finding people who aren't afraid to speak it." He looked down at the folder. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath. Now we finish what they started. After he left, I opened his statement and read every word. It was all there, the timing, the glass, the vial. It wasn't just testimony. It was the truth written in ink. I placed the folder beside the other files on my desk, financial reports, transcripts, and Rhodes's detailed legal plan. Each document was a brick in the wall I was building around Dylan and Adler. At midnight, the phone rang again. It wasn't Rhodes this time. It was Chloe. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. "Dad?" "Yes." "I saw the news. They're saying terrible things about Dylan, about me. They're saying what's true." Silence stretched across the line. I could hear her breathing, uneven. "I didn't know what he was going to do," she said. I closed my eyes. "You watched him pour the powder, Chloe. You knew enough." She started to cry. I was scared. "He said if I didn't help, he'd ruin you another way. You thought poisoning me was saving me." Her sobs cracked through the receiver. "I didn't think at all. I just wanted it to stop." I didn't reply. I let her sit in the silence she had made. Finally, she whispered, "What happens now?" "Now," I said softly, "you start telling the truth. To me, to the police, to yourself." The next morning, I met Rhodes at his office again. He looked tired but satisfied. "Adler signed a full confession," he said, sliding a document across the table. "He confirmed everything: Dylan's payments, the prescriptions, even the plan to have you declared incompetent. The Bureau's moving in today." "Then it's done," I said. Rhodes shook his head. "Not quite. Dylan's still holding one card, the shipping manifests. If he destroys them before the audit, the feds will lose half the evidence. We need to find them before he does." I frowned. They'd be encrypted. He's arrogant, but not careless. True, Rhodes said, but Adler mentioned something. Dylan keeps backups, hard copies, locked in a storage unit under a false company name. Where Arlington? I've already got Hale running it down. We left the office an hour later. As we drove, Rhodes explained the plan. The FBI will raid Cross Exports tomorrow morning. But if we get the files first, we can hand them the smoking gun. It'll end him. I looked out the window at the skyline sliding by. Then, let's end him. By nightfall, we were parked outside a nondescript storage facility in an industrial park. The security lights flickered weakly. Rhodes cut the engine and looked at me. "You don't have to go in," he said. "Hale's team will handle it." I shook my head. No. This started with me. It ends with me. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust. Hale and his agents were already there, flashlights cutting through the dim aisles of metal doors. He gestured for us to follow. "Unit 214, he whispered. "Registered under Cross Imports LLC. Lease paid in cash." Hale forced the lock. The door screeched open, revealing stacks of boxes, neatly labeled each with dates and shipment numbers. On the far wall, a filing cabinet gleamed faintly in the flashlight beam. Rhodes stepped forward, opening the top drawer. His eyes widened. He kept everything. There were manifests, customs forms, signed contracts, all stamped with the Helios Biosystems logo. My logo. I felt something twist inside me, a mix of anger and pride. He'd used the name I built, the trust I earned, as his camouflage. Hale started photographing everything. "This is enough to bury him under federal charges," he said. I nodded, running a hand over one of the folders. "Good. Let the truth do the burying." When we stepped outside, the first light of dawn was breaking. I watched the sun rise over the empty warehouses, the light cold but clean. Rhodes handed me a copy of one of the manifests. "Keep this," he said. "A reminder of what year you survived." I looked at it for a long time, then folded it carefully into my coat pocket. Back home, I brewed a pot of coffee and stood by the window as the aroma filled the room. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The house still felt haunted, but now it was a different kind of ghost, the kind that lingered after victory, not loss. The phone buzzed again. A text from Rhodes. "He's on the move. Expect a call soon." I smiled faintly. Dylan would call. Of course he would. Men like him always did when the walls started closing in. He'd beg, threaten, or promise. It didn't matter which. I was ready for all of it. I sat down at my desk, watching the light spill across the lake. Ellen's photo caught the glow, her smile soft and knowing. "You'd tell me to stop," I said quietly. "But I can't. Not yet. Because justice wasn't about balance anymore. It was about truth, about legacy. And the truth was, the man who tried to erase me was finally learning what it felt like to disappear. Somewhere out there, Dylan Cross was watching everything crumble, his lies, his company, his empire of deception. And soon he'd learn what I had always known, that power built on fraud collapses faster than trust, rebuilt with patience. The storm he started was coming full circle. And this time, I wasn't the one running from it. The call came just after noon. I was sitting on the porch, the lake glimmering under the Texas sun, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I didn't need to look twice to know who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad Dylan's voice cracked through the line, smooth but strained. "You're a hard man to reach." I leaned back in my chair, my tone calm. "You've been busy." A bitter laugh. "You made sure of that. You think you've won, don't you? That courtroom stunt, it won't stick." I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "It doesn't have to stick, son. It just has to make the right people start asking questions." There was silence on the other end, followed by a sharp exhale. You've ruined everything. Chloe's a mess. My name's in every paper in the state. You think this makes you the hero? You've just burned down your family for nothing. Family, I repeated softly. You burned that bridge the moment you touched that vial. His voice changed, hardening into steel. You don't understand. You never did. You think this is about money, but it's not. You just don't get what kind of people you're dealing with. That caught my attention. What kind of people? He hesitated, and I could hear the faint tap of his fingers against something nervous energy uncontrolled. You should have left the company alone, Michael. You think you built something clean, but Helios isn't clean. It hasn't been for years. You were just too old to see it. I sat forward, my pulse tightening. What are you talking about? Ask your precious Rhodes, he said, venom dripping from every syllable. Ask him about the contracts you signed. Ask him about Helios shipments that never showed up on your books. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the words replaying in my head. Rhodes had built my legal empire, shielded Helios during its rise. But if Dylan was telling the truth, if there were deals hidden beneath my signature, it meant someone else had been profiting from my name long before my family tried to destroy me. I called Rhodes immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Peter, he said, his tone brisk, professional. We need to talk, I said. Now. Within the hour, I was back in his downtown office. The glass walls looked out over Dallas, the same view that had once filled me with pride. Now it just looked like a city of strangers. Rhodes stood by his desk, arms crossed. You sound rattled. What happened? I replayed the conversation word for word. He listened without interruption, his eyes narrowing with each sentence. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute before he spoke. He's bluffing. Maybe, I said. But if he's not, Rhodes exhaled slowly. You're suggesting that someone's been laundering shipments through your company without your knowledge. That would mean falsified manifests, fraudulent invoices, and federal-level corruption. Then we find out, I said. He walked to his computer, typing rapidly. Helios's logistics were handled by two divisions, the domestic side, which you signed off on, and the international export chain. The latter was managed under the Helios RX branch, created 5 years ago during your expansion into Europe. I remember I said. But I thought we dissolved that branch. Rhodes shook his head. You dissolved your copy of it. A duplicate registration was filed 6 months later under the name Helios RX Global LLC in Delaware. Who authorized that? He scrolled, then froze. Your signature. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. He turned the screen toward me. It was my name, my exact cursive, my signature style stamped on the digital filing. Below it was the approval seal of the state of Delaware. Someone forged it, I said. Someone had access to your old legal templates, Rhodes replied. Someone who worked close to you. Chloe, I whispered. He nodded grimly. And Dylan could have funneled money through that false branch for years without you noticing. Every shipment that went through Helios RX Global would have looked legitimate on the surface. The auditors never checked because technically it was you. I felt the weight of 40 years pressing on my chest. My company, my life's work had been used to move something I didn't even understand. Can we trace it? I asked. Rhodes hesitated. Maybe, but it's risky. If we dig too deep, we alert the same people Dylan's afraid of. Then we don't dig, I said. We cut the whole thing off. How? By turning their audit into a weapon. Rhodes's expression hardened into admiration. You're thinking of triggering the audit yourself? Exactly. If the federal auditors open every file, they'll find the falsified records before Dylan's partners have a chance to erase them. but we need to make sure they know where to look. Rhodes walked to his desk, pulling out a flash drive. I can prepare the trigger letter. Anonymous, of course. It'll go straight to the Financial Crimes Division. Do it, I said. And send copies to the IRS and DEA. If Helios RX was moving pharmaceuticals under false manifests, we're not just talking about fraud. We're talking about trafficking. He gave a slow whistle. You're lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Good, I said. Let's see who runs first. That night, I drove home in silence. The sky over Dallas was streaked with lightning, the storm rolling in heavy and low. At a red light, I saw my reflection in the windshield, older, harder, but finally clear. When I got home, there was a single envelope waiting on my doorstep. No address, no stamp. Just my name in neat handwriting. I brought it inside, tore it open carefully. Inside was a photo grainy but unmistakable. A cargo container with the Helios RX logo sitting in a foreign port. Below it, a line of text printed in block letters. Some things shouldn't be found. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The message was clear. Someone knew what we were doing, and they didn't want the truth to come out. The next morning, Rhodes called. The letters sent. The bureau's acknowledged receipt. They'll begin the audit within 72 hours. Good, I said. Then we wait. He hesitated. Peter, whoever sent that photo, they're not bluffing. You may want to lay low for a few days. I looked out the window at the rising sun. No, I've been hiding long enough. That afternoon, I returned to Helios headquarters for the first time since the sale. The building still bore my name in chrome letters. The lobby smelled the same polished stone, expensive coffee ambition. I walked past the receptionist without a word and headed straight for the executive offices. Every photo on the wall was a memory, Laura, the old team, the garage where it began. But now they felt like artifacts from another life. I stopped at my old office door. My nameplate was gone. In its place, Dylan Cross, managing director. I opened the door. It was empty. The furniture stripped the shelves bare. But on the desk sat a single item, a framed photo of Chloe smiling taken years ago at a company retreat. On the back, someone had scrawled 3 words in blue ink. She still chose him. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. For all his arrogance, Dylan had never understood one thing. He thought I fought for money, but I wasn't fighting for dollars. I was fighting for memory, for meaning, for the idea that truth still mattered. As I turned to leave, I glanced once more at the photo and whispered, "Then so will I." Outside, the storm had finally broken. Rain hammered against the windows, washing the streets clean. Somewhere far across the city, Dylan Cross was realizing that the empire he'd built on deceit was already crumbling, and that the man he tried to bury was not only alive, but had just lit the fuse that would destroy him completely. The storm didn't stop for 2 days. Sheets of rain battered the windows, and thunder rolled so deep it rattled the floorboards. I barely slept. Every few hours, Rhodes called with updates, new subpoenas, new evidence, and one growing truth: the audit was no longer just an internal review. It had become a federal investigation. On the 3rd morning, I woke to silence. The rain had stopped, the air outside washed clean. But as I brewed my first cup of coffee, a dark sedan pulled up in front of my house. 2 men stepped out in matching gray suits, their movements brisk, deliberate. They weren't reporters. I opened the door before they even knocked. Mr. Trent, the taller one, asked, showing a badge. "Special Agent Davis, FBI. This is Agent Navarro. We'd like to ask you a few questions about Helios RX Global." I stepped aside. "Come in. I was expecting you." They entered, scanning the room like men trained never to miss a detail. Davis placed a folder on the table. We're investigating an international network suspected of using legitimate biotech shipments as cover for illegal pharmaceutical imports. You're listed as the founder of Helios RX Global. I sat across from them. I'm not. My company was Helios Biosystems. The global branch was forged. Navarro slid a photo across the table. It showed a shipping manifest, my name, my digital signature, and a list of compounds with medical codes I didn't recognize. These were shipped under your authorization last year to Istanbul, then rerouted to Dubai. Do you deny this shipment existed? I don't deny the shipment, I said. I deny my involvement. Someone used my name, my templates, and my company's credibility. I believe my son-in-law, Dylan Cross, orchestrated it. Navarro nodded as if she already knew. We've been following Cross exports for 6 months. We suspected smuggling, but your connection makes this bigger. The quantities of olanzapine alone exceed any medical order on record. That word again, olanzapine. The drug that started it all. The same compound that had nearly destroyed me at that restaurant. Davis leaned forward. You said you believe Cross forged your authorization. Can you prove it? I reached for the folder I'd prepared with Rhodes' emails, financial transfers, Adler's confession, even the anonymous photograph of the shipping container. This I said, sliding it across. And if you want more, audit the Delaware registration file. The digital certificate will show a different IP address. It wasn't signed from Texas, it was signed from Dylan's office in Los Angeles. The two agents exchanged a look. Navarro smiled faintly. You've done our work for us. Not yet, I said. If I were you, I'd move fast. He knows the audit's happening. He'll try to disappear. Davis stood closing the folder. We already have a team in motion. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Trent. You'll want to stay available. We may need your testimony. As they left, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time since the poison hit my glass, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. By evening, Rhodes called. They took the bait, he said. The FBI's raiding Cross exports right now. They have warrants for Dylan and Adler. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone. And Chloe, she's been named a witness, not a suspect for now. You can thank your statement for that. Good, I said quietly. Let her watch the truth for once. Hours later, as the sun bled orange over the lake, the news broke. FBI raids Cross exports in federal smuggling probe. The image on the screen showed Dylan being led out of his office in handcuffs, shouting something at the agents. The camera zoomed in on his face, rage, disbelief, and the faintest trace of fear. I muted the TV and sat back. My hands were steady. I thought victory would feel triumphant, but it didn't. It just felt quiet. The phone rang again. This time it was Chloe. Dad, she sobbed. They took him. The FBI took Dylan, I know. They said it's about Helios, about shipping drugs. You have to help him, please. He didn't mean for any of this, he just got in too deep. I stared at the rain-streaked window. You still don't get it, do you? He didn't fall into this. He built it. Every lie, every signature, every dollar. You just watched. Her breath hitched. I was scared. I was too, I said. The night he tried to poison me. She didn't respond. I could hear her crying softly. Finally, she whispered, What happens to us now? That depends, I said, my voice low, on whether you start living a life worth forgiving. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. My house felt emptier than it ever had before, but for the first time that emptiness was honest. 2 days later, Rhodes and I met in his office. The FBI had already seized Dylan's records and traced 14 million in offshore accounts linked to Cross exports. It's over, Rhodes said. They'll file charges next week. I nodded, though part of me didn't believe it. Men like Dylan didn't accept endings. They twisted them. Rhodes poured 2 glasses of whiskey. You know you could walk away from this now. Retire somewhere quiet. No one would blame you. I looked out at the city skyline. That's not what I built Helios for. I didn't spend 40 years fighting to watch my legacy rot in someone else's hands. The company's name still matters. I need to make sure it survives the stain. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Then we rebuild. On your terms this time. The sound of my phone cut through the silence again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Dad. Chloe's voice trembled. They let me see him, just for a minute. He said he knows something about you, about Helios. He told me to tell you that you're not safe. Not safe from what I don't know. He just said he's coming for him next. Who's he, Dad? I froze. The word he hung in the air like a ghost. Chloe, I said slowly. Did he say a name? No. But he sounded terrified. When I hung up, I turned to Rhodes. He's not bluffing. Someone else was behind this. Rhodes nodded grimly. Then we find out who, before they find you. That night I sat by the window, the lake dark and still. For months I had been fighting ghosts for my own family. Now I realized the real enemy was still out there, someone powerful enough to make Dylan afraid. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy again, thick with the promise of another. And this time it wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about survival. The next morning began with sirens in the distance and a chill in the air that didn't belong to Texas. I hadn't slept. I sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of last night's coffee cold and bitter in my cup. When my phone buzzed, I didn't jump. I was expecting it. Rhodes's voice was tight-clipped. Peter, we've got a problem. What kind? The kind that doesn't leave loose ends. Dylan didn't act alone. The Bureau traced several of his offshore accounts, and one of them connects directly to a holding company out of Zurich. Guess who the director is? I waited. Dr. Adler. I frowned. The doctor? He's not just a corrupt physician. He's been laundering money for an international supplier. Pharmaceuticals, synthetic compounds, research materials, some legal, most not. The feds think he was the bridge between Dylan's smuggling operation and something bigger. Bigger, I repeated. How big are we talking? Rhodes exhaled. Let's just say the people who funded this don't take kindly to exposure. The Bureau intercepted a message from one of Adler's accounts this morning, a single sentence. What did it say? He talks, he disappears. The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked out the window at the lake sunlight flickering across its surface like shattered glass. They mean Dylan. They mean anyone, Rhodes said quietly. Including you. I stood pacing the kitchen. Let them come. I've dealt with worse. Not like this, Rhodes replied. These people aren't businessmen. They don't sue you, they erase you. For the first time in weeks, a cold ripple of fear passed through me. So what do we do? I've already moved the sensitive files to an off-site server, he said. Encrypted multiple backups. But you need to leave the house. Now, go somewhere no one would expect. Somewhere familiar, but off the grid. I looked around my quiet home. Every inch of it carried memories. Ellen's laugh echoing in the hall, Chloe's childhood drawings still framed in the study. Leaving felt like abandoning them all over again. How long, I asked. Until the Bureau gives the all clear. They're moving fast, but if Adler's network is as deep as it looks, this isn't over. I packed light. One bag, a change of clothes, the flash drive Rhodes had given me, and Ellen's wedding ring. By the time I stepped outside, the air was heavy with humidity, the storm clouds rolling back in. I drove north away from Dallas until the city lights vanished in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I reached the old ranch Ellen and I had bought decades ago, our first home long since empty, but still standing. It was remote, surrounded by acres of pine, and the phone signal barely worked. Perfect. The house smelled of dust and old wood. I lit the fireplace, sat in the creaking armchair, and listened to the wind outside. For the first time since the poisoning, I was truly alone. That night, I dreamed of Ellen. She was standing by the lake, smiling, her hair catching the sun. When I tried to reach her, she only whispered one word, watch. I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. Instinct kicked in. I killed the lights, moved to the window, and peered through the blinds. A car was parked at the edge of the property. Black, unfamiliar. Two silhouettes inside. They weren't moving. I grabbed the old revolver from the cabinet, the one Ellen had hated, and waited. For 10 minutes, nothing. Then one of the doors opened. A man stepped out, tall, lean, his posture deliberate. He didn't walk toward the house. He just stood there, looking straight at my window as if he knew I was there. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Rhodes. They found Adler. He's dead. Before I could reply, the headlights flicked on. The car reversed, slowly turned, and vanished down the dirt road. I stood there for a long time, the gun heavy in my hand. Whoever they weren't here to talk. By morning, I was back on the road heading to Dallas. Rhodes wasn't happy to see me. You weren't supposed to move, he said, pacing his office. Someone was watching the ranch, I told him. And Adler's dead. They're cleaning house. He rubbed his temples. The bureau confirmed it. Suicide, supposedly. But no note, no weapon. Classic cleanup, so now it's just Dylan left. Not exactly, Rhodes said. Dylan's been transferred to federal custody, but he's trying to make a deal. He's offering names, yours among them. He's claiming you were the one who approved everything. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. Of course he is. He's desperate. But if the wrong prosecutor believes him, this could turn ugly fast. You might end up fighting your own company's crimes in court. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Then I'll make sure he doesn't have a chance to talk first. Rhodes's brow furrowed. You're not thinking I'm thinking of paying my son-in-law one last visit, I said. That evening, I drove to the detention center where Dylan was being held. I didn't need approval. Money still opened doors even in places built to keep them closed. A guard owed Rhodes a favor, and 15 minutes later, I was standing in front of the thick glass that separated us. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Pale, unshaven, his arrogance cracked, but not gone. The moment he saw me, he smiled. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. He leaned forward, his eyes dark. You think this ends with me? You think I was the mastermind? You were just the fool who built the perfect front. They used your name, your systems, your trust. You were the first domino, old man. I was just smart enough to push it. You pushed too far, I said quietly. And now the whole line's falling on you. He laughed low and ugly. You don't get it, do you? You think they'll let you walk away clean? They'll come for you next. And when they do, there won't be a court or a lawyer to save you. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. The man who'd tried to erase me, who'd turned my daughter against me, and felt nothing but exhaustion. Goodbye, Dylan. As I turned to leave, he called out, They already know where you are, Peter, and you can't hide from ghosts. Outside, the sky had turned black. The first drops of rain began to fall again, heavy and cold. When I got into the car, my phone buzzed once more. A new message. No number, no name, just a line of text. You should have stayed gone. I looked at the screen, then at the storm ahead of me. For months, I'd been fighting my family. But now the game had changed. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was survival. The storm followed me home. Sheets of rain lashed the windows, lightning cutting across the night like silver scars. I sat in the dark study, the phone still in my hand, the anonymous message glowing on the screen. You should have stayed gone. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt even when my own daughter tried to poison me: vulnerability. This wasn't family greed anymore. This was precision. Someone out there had been watching, waiting, and now they were making their move. Rhodes called before sunrise. His voice was tight. Peter, I think we've got a serious problem. I didn't even bother asking which one. Talk. The Bureau intercepted another encrypted transmission from Zurich. They couldn't trace the sender, but the message was addressed to you. To me exactly. It said, "The shipment you buried is ours again." The words hit like a blade sliding between my ribs. What shipment? That's what they're trying to figure out. But Peter, there's more. Adler wasn't just moving drugs. He was moving biocompounds. Experimental ones. The kind you developed 20 years ago before Helios went public. My pulse quickened. Impossible. Those prototypes were destroyed. That's what the records said, Rhodes replied. But if Helios RX Global used your old designs, those compounds could still exist. And now someone wants them back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "Find out where they're keeping Dylan. If he knew about this, I want to hear it from him." When I arrived at the detention center, the air inside was different, quieter, tense. The same guard who'd let me in before met me at the door, his face pale. "Mr. Trent," he said, "you might want to sit down." I didn't. "What happened?" He hesitated. "Your son-in-law. He's dead." For a moment, the words didn't register. "What?" "They found him in his cell 2 hours ago. No signs of struggle, no note. Cameras conveniently went dark for 6 minutes. I stared at the guard. I sighed. He shook his head slowly. "You tell me." My chest tightened. Dylan had been arrogant, reckless, cruel, but he was no coward. He wouldn't take his own life. Someone had silenced him. I walked out without another word, the rain pounding harder than ever. In the car, I called Rhodes. "He's gone," I said. Rhodes swore under his breath. "Of course he is." Cleanup number 3. Number 3, Adler, the Zurich intermediary, and now Dylan. They're cutting every loose end. Whoever's behind this isn't just trying to cover tracks, they're finishing a job. A cold realization settled over me. Then that makes me the last loose end. Rhodes's silence was confirmation enough. "Get me the original Helios archives," I said. "Everything from before the IPO, the compounds, the formulas, the early stage testing. If they're after something I built, I need to know what it is." He hesitated. "That data's been sealed for years. The patents are locked under government confidentiality." "Then unseal them," I said. "Or find someone who can." By afternoon, I was back in Rhodes's office, the storm now a distant rumble beyond the glass. He slid a hard drive across the desk. "This is everything I could dig up. But Peter, be careful. These files were flagged. Someone else accessed them 2 days ago. Who couldn't trace it? But they had clearance." I plugged in the drive. The files loaded rows of clinical data, chemical codes, and old photographs from the early Helios days. Then I saw it. Project Nereus. The name alone was enough to bring back a flood of memories. 1998. My lab team in San Diego. Ellen smiling as she brought us sandwiches after midnight shifts. The compound we were developing designed to repair neural pathways after trauma. It had worked on lab animals, but the side effects were catastrophic. Uncontrolled aggression, memory distortion. We shut it down after 2 years. Every vial was supposed to have been destroyed. But there it was, sitting in front of me in black and white, a shipping log dated from last year, stamped under Helios RX Global. Destination Dubai. Contents Nereus Compound Variant 3A. Rhodes leaned over my shoulder. That's what they were moving. God help us, I whispered. He looked grim. If that formula's in the wrong hands, it's not just a black market drug. It's a weapon. The next few days blurred together calls from the FBI late-night meetings, whispered warnings. Every time we got close to an answer, the trail went cold. Servers deleted. Witnesses vanished. Then one night my phone buzzed again. No caller ID, just a video file. I hesitated, then pressed play. The feed was grainy shot from what looked like a security camera in a warehouse. Two men stood in front of a steel crate marked with the Helios RX logo. One of them I recognized instantly, Agent Davis. The other turned, and my blood froze. It was Rhodes. He was speaking calmly, almost casually, as Davis handed him a clipboard. The audio was faint, but I caught enough. The assets recovered. Make sure the Bureau's report blames Cross. Trent doesn't need to know. The video ended. For a long moment I just sat there staring at the dark screen. My most trusted ally. The man who'd saved me in court. The man who'd sworn loyalty. I called him immediately. No answer. By morning his office was empty, files gone, desk cleared. His assistant said he'd flown out on business. No one knew where. I drove to the one place I thought he'd go, the Helios Tower. The lobby was nearly deserted at that hour, the marble floors reflecting the low amber lights. I took the elevator to the top floor, my reflection multiplying across the mirrored walls. When the doors opened, Rhodes was there, standing by the window, the city lights painting his silhouette in silver. I was wondering how long it would take you, he said without turning around. You used me, I said quietly. He sighed. No, Peter. I protected you. I kept your name clean while I finished the job you started 20 years ago. What job? Nereus, he said simply. You created something the world wasn't ready for. The government buried it, but do you think they ever planned to destroy it? No. They just needed a way to move it without fingerprints. Dylan gave us that way. I felt sick. You're working with them. He turned, then his expression cold and calm. With them, I am them. You think Helios was ever yours? You were the face, Peter, the genius they could parade in front of investors. But the real machine was always underneath. You let my daughter almost kill me, I said. He shrugged. Collateral damage. You were too close to discovering the truth. I took a step forward, my voice low and even. So what now? Do you kill me too? He smiled faintly. You're too valuable for that. They don't want you dead. They want your silence. Lightning flashed behind him, turning the glass into a mirror of fire. I've spent my life fighting men like you, I said. And you know what I learned? He raised an eyebrow. Enlighten me. That the ones who hide behind power always forget one thing. Every empire falls from the inside. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened again. Two figures stepped out, federal agents, guns drawn. Rhodes's face went pale for the first time. Mr. Rhodes, one of them said, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The storm had finally come for him. As they led him past me, he leaned close, his voice a whisper. This doesn't end with me, Peter. You've only seen the surface. I watched him go, the sound of the rain pounding against the glass behind me. He was right. The war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. And the truth waiting beneath it was something darker than I had ever imagined. The elevator doors closed behind me, sealing off the chaos that had just unfolded. Rhodes was gone, arrested, exposed, yet still smug enough to whisper that it wasn't over. I believed him. Men like him never played a single game. They built labyrinths. And if he was only a piece of this, then somewhere above him sat someone who'd been watching from the start. By the time I reached the street, the rain had stopped. The city lights gleamed across puddles like fractured glass. I stood there for a moment, breathing the wet air, watching a black van pull away from the Helios Tower roads inside, flanked by federal agents. Even from a distance, I could see him glance back once. That single look wasn't of defeat. It was a promise. I drove home in silence, every thought a loop of unanswered questions. What was Nereus really for who funded its rebirth? And if Rhodes was part of it, how deep did it go? When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on. I hadn't left it that way. Instinct told me to wait. I scanned the house, every window dark except for a faint glow coming from the study. I reached into the glove compartment, felt the weight of the revolver, and moved quietly toward the door. Inside, everything was still. The glow came from my computer screen, which shouldn't have been on. A message flickered across it. No sender, no address, just white text on black background. "You're not done yet, Mr. Trent. Mr. Trent." Then the screen went black. Before I could react, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I answered without a word. A voice distorted by static spoke softly. "You want to know who built Helios RX Global Look closer to home? Who is this?" The call disconnected. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sat down slowly, the revolver still in my hand. Closer to home. The phrase echoed like a curse. For the next 3 hours, I went through every file on my laptop, emails, contracts, security reports. Nothing stood out. Then as I scrolled through archived communications, I found something strange. A message buried in an old thread between me and an administrative contractor named E. Walker. It was dated 3 years after Ellen's death. The subject line read, "Helios RX Initiative Proposal." Attached was a PDF, dozens of pages of technical data, the kind of detailed project outline only an insider could have written. It described Nereus as Phase 2 Neurocognitive Recovery Serum Projected Military Use. The document was signed at the bottom by C. Trent. My heart froze. Chloe. My daughter hadn't just known about the project, she'd revived it. The room seemed to tilt. My throat went dry as I scrolled through the rest of the attachments emails between her and Rhodes' contracts with foreign labs, even correspondence with a Mr. D. Cross discussing distribution channels. The entire operation had started long before Dylan ever stepped into the picture. He was never the mastermind. He was the salesman. The real architect had been my own daughter. I closed my eyes, the weight of it crushing my chest. All this time I thought I was fighting to save her from him. But the truth was far worse. He'd only followed her lead. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I called Rhodes's contact at the bureau agent Navarro. She answered on the second ring. "Navarro, it's Peter Trent. I have new evidence." What kind evidence that Nereus wasn't just stolen, it was resurrected? By my daughter. There was a pause. "Mr. Trent, we've been reviewing the files from Rhodes's server. Some of them support that theory. We believe Chloe may have been involved earlier than you realized." "How early?" "Before your wife's death," she said quietly. "There's correspondence between Chloe and a military biotech contractor under a pseudonym. She was helping them repackage your early research. It appears she wanted to prove herself to outdo you." The words landed like lead. I couldn't breathe. "Does she know we know?" "She will soon," Navarro said. "We're issuing a subpoena. But Peter, if she reaches out to you, do not meet her alone." That warning came too late. By mid-afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. Chloe stood there, her hair soaked from the drizzle, her face pale but determined. "Dad," she said softly. I stared at her, unable to speak. "Why are you here?" "To end this," she whispered. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the still glowing computer. "They've told you everything, haven't they?" "Not everything," I said. "Why?" She exhaled shakily. "Because I was tired of being invisible. You built Helios from nothing, and you never saw me. Not as a scientist, not as a partner, just your daughter, someone to protect. I wanted to show you I could build something too. By resurrecting Nereus," I said sharply. "By risking lives." Her voice broke. "I improved it, Dad. I fixed what you couldn't. Nereus 3A works. It heals trauma, repairs the brain. But they wouldn't fund it without control, so You partnered with killers," I interrupted. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know who they really were. By the time I realized, Dylan had already tied us to the shipments. I tried to pull out, but Rhodes said it was too late. He said the project was unstoppable. I took a step closer. "Did you try to poison me?" Her face crumpled. "No. Dylan said it was a sedative that you'd wake up confused, just long enough for him to take over the accounts." "I swear, I didn't know it would kill me," she broke down. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But belief and forgiveness were two different things. "They're coming for me," she whispered. Rhodes had partners, real ones. They think I know where the compound is. "Please, you're the only one who can protect me. You think I can protect you from this," I said quietly. "You built it. You unleashed it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, Dad." "You're all I have left." For a long moment we stood in silence, the storm building again outside. Then I nodded once. "If you're telling the truth, you'll come with me. You'll tell the Bureau everything." She hesitated, eyes flickering. "I can't." "Then you've already made your choice." Before she could answer, headlights flared through the window. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Chloe's face went pale. "They found me," she whispered. I moved toward the window. 3 figures stepped out, armed, their movements precise. Not federal agents, professionals. "Upstairs," I said. "Now." She obeyed, and I grabbed the revolver. The front door rattled once, twice, then burst open. The first man through barely saw me before I fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The second dove for cover, shouting something in a language I didn't recognize. Chloe screamed upstairs. I fired again, shattering the window. The intruders retreated to the car engines, roaring tires screaming as they tore down the driveway and vanished into the storm. When the house finally went quiet again, I lowered the gun, breathing hard. The air smelled of gunpowder and rain. Chloe came down the stairs, trembling. "Dad, what now?" I looked at her, my hand still shaking, the revolver heavy in my grip. "Now," I said, my voice cold and steady, "we finish what you started." Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time, echoing off the water. And for the first time, I knew this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about redemption, hers, if she could find it, and mine, if I still deserved it. The Bureau arrived just before dawn. Blue lights flickered across the wet lawn, painting the house in flashes of cold color. Chloe sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, trembling but silent. Agent Navarro stepped through the door first, followed by 2 others. Her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Trent," she said calmly, "we received your call. You said there was an armed intrusion." I nodded. 3 men, trained. They knew exactly where to find us. Navarro's eyes moved to Chloe. "And I assume this is your daughter?" Chloe didn't look up. She just whispered, They were coming for me. Navarro crouched in front of her, lowering her voice. We know, Chloe. We've been tracking communications linked to the Zurich accounts. They knew Rhodes was compromised. You were their next target. I folded my arms. So, who are they really? Navarro stood and turned to me. We're still piecing that together. But every trail leads back to a private contractor, Argus Biotechnics. Officially, they dissolved 5 years ago. Unofficially, they've been operating offshore, funded by shell companies tied to foreign defense agencies. Rhodes was one of their facilitators. And, Nereus, I asked. Was their prize, Navarro said grimly. They've been trying to recreate your research since you shut it down in the 90s. Your formula was unique regenerative at the molecular level. It could restore damaged neurons. But when combined with the wrong agents, it also enhances aggression and cognitive control. Argus saw it as a weapon. Chloe's voice cracked. I didn't know that. I just wanted to prove it worked. Navarro looked at her, almost pitying. And now they'll kill anyone who knows too much. One of the agents stepped forward. Sir, we've secured the perimeter. No sign of the intruders. Tire tracks lead toward Route 67, then disappear. Navarro nodded. They'll regroup. You both need protective custody. No, I said. They'll expect that. I'm not hiding again. She gave me a sharp look. Peter, this isn't about pride. These people assassinate witnesses. You're on their list. I've been on lists before, I replied. But if they want Nereus, they'll have to come for it themselves. Navarro hesitated, then sighed. You have 48 hours. After that, I can't hold the Bureau off. If you have something to settle, do it fast. When she left, the house fell into uneasy silence. Chloe sat by the fire, staring at the flames. Dad, she whispered. What if they find us again? They will, I said. That's why we move first. By noon, we were on the road. I drove while she watched the horizon, pale and silent. We headed west toward El Paso neutral ground. The desert stretched endlessly, golden and harsh, the kind of place that punished both weakness and guilt. Halfway there, Chloe finally spoke. I've been thinking about Mom. I glanced at her. What about her? She always said you were married to your work. I used to think that was a bad thing. But now I get it. You weren't building a company. You were protecting something. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Your mother saw what ambition does to people. She warned me before she died that someday someone would use my work for something ugly. Chloe looked out the window, voice trembling. And I became that person. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say that could undo the truth. We reached the safe house by dusk, a small ranch outside Las Cruces, hidden behind a stretch of dry scrubland. Navarro had arranged it quietly under a different name. The agents stationed there were polite but tense. One handed me a burner phone. Direct line to Agent Navarro, he said. If anything happens, call immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. The desert was too quiet. The air buzzed faintly with heat, even after midnight. I stood outside looking at the stars. The horizon glowed faintly from a distant thunderstorm. Chloe joined me after a while. You think we'll make it out of this? I don't know, I said honestly. But if we don't stop them, no one will. She nodded slowly, wiping a tear. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. I turned toward her. Then make it mean something. She looked confused. What do you mean? Tomorrow, I said, you're going to record everything you know about Nereus, the formula, the partners, the tests, all of it. We'll send it straight to the Bureau and every major media outlet at once. If Argus can't bury the truth, they can't use it. Chloe hesitated. That could expose me too. Good, I said. That's how redemption starts. We spent the morning documenting everything. She dictated formulas and sequences while I cross-checked data with Rhodes's old files. By noon, we had compiled everything into one encrypted drive. The plan was simple: upload it from multiple networks to make it untraceable. But plans have a way of collapsing when you need them most. At 2 p.m., the agents outside went silent. No radio chatter, no footsteps, just the hum of the wind. I looked through the window. The SUV that had been parked near the gate was gone. "Stay here," I told Chloe. I stepped outside, the heat pressing against my skin. The gate hung open. In the distance, a plume of dust rose along the road, a convoy approaching. "Dad," Chloe called from the door. "Inside," I said. "Now!" The first bullet shattered the window before she could move. She screamed. I pulled her down behind the counter as more shots ripped through the walls. The desert exploded into chaos engines, roaring voices shouting in a language I didn't recognize. "They found us," she cried. I reached for the revolver, checked the chamber. "Stay low." I fired toward the door. One of the intruders dropped his rifle, clattering on the porch. Another round whistled past my ear, splintering the wall. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Then a voice called out from outside, calm and cold. "Mr. Trent, you have something that belongs to us." I glanced at Chloe. "The drive." She shook her head, terrified. "They'll kill us." "Not if they don't find it." I slipped the small device into the lining of my jacket and whispered, "If I say run, you run. Dad, promise me." Footsteps crunched closer. A shadow crossed the window. I waited, heart-pounding, finger on the trigger. Then suddenly sirens wailed in the distance. Dozens of them. The roar grew louder, convoy engines, bureau vehicles. Chloe gasped. The FBI. The attackers scrambled, firing wildly before retreating toward their trucks. I crawled to the window and saw Navarro herself leading the charge agents, fanning out in formation. The fight lasted less than a minute. When the dust cleared, 3 men lay on the ground. The rest had fled into the desert. Navarro stormed in, gun drawn. "You all right?" I nodded, still catching my breath. "Barely." She scanned the damage, then looked at me sharply. "You were right. They were Argus operatives. We intercepted their comms. They were ordered to recover Nereus and eliminate witnesses." "They failed," I said quietly. Navarro holstered her weapon. "For now. But they'll regroup. We're transferring both of you to federal protection tonight." Chloe's voice was small, and the drive. Navarro looked between us. "We'll take it from here." I hesitated. "Not yet." Navarro frowned. "Peter, this isn't a negotiation." "I know," I said. "But if you want them to stop, you'll need leverage, and right now this drive is the only thing keeping us alive." For a moment she considered it. Then she nodded. "Fine. You keep it until we're safe, but once we reach Washington, it goes straight to the Bureau." Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the desert. As the agents packed up, I looked at Chloe. She was pale, shaken, but alive. "Dad," she whispered, "what if they follow us again?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make sure the world knows who they are before they get the chance." The sirens faded into the wind, the desert swallowing the sound. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to resolve. The storm wasn't over. But now, at least I wasn't facing it alone. The jet touched down in Washington just after midnight. The sky outside was the color of ash and rain, streaked across the windows, as if the storm had followed us across the desert. Chloe sat beside me, her face pale but composed, her eyes locked on the small encrypted drive I still carried in my jacket pocket. Agent Navarro met us at the tarmac, flanked by a pair of black SUVs. "We've arranged safe housing until the debrief," she said briskly. "The Bureau wants your statement and full cooperation." Once we verify the data, we can move against Argus officially. I nodded. And when that happens, Navarro's eyes soften slightly. Then, this ends, Mr. Trent. For both of you. I wanted to believe her. They took us to a secure townhouse near DuPont Circle, anonymous from the outside, armored within. The air smelled faintly of paint and new carpet, like a place prepared in a hurry. I sat by the window while Chloe paced the room, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "They're not going to let us walk away," she whispered. "Even if Argus is exposed, someone else will just replace them." "Maybe," I said. "But the truth won't disappear with them." She stopped pacing. "You still think truth matters?" I looked out at the city lights. It's all that ever did. By morning, Navarro returned with news. The bureaus confirmed multiple links between Argus Biotechnics and foreign defense investors, she said, spreading documents across the table. "Your data filled the gaps we couldn't prove. The hearing's scheduled for next week, and you'll be there to testify." Chloe sank into a chair, her voice barely a whisper. "And if I testify, they'll know I helped build Nereus." Navarro didn't flinch. "If you don't, more people will die because of it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Chloe nodded slowly, understanding that redemption wasn't just confession, it was consequence. Later that evening, when Navarro stepped out to take a call, I walked onto the balcony. The city stretched out below, endless and indifferent. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the deaths pressed down until I could barely breathe. Chloe joined me after a while. "Do you think Mom would forgive me?" she asked quietly. I didn't look at her. "Your mother believed people could lose their way without losing their soul. But forgiveness," I said, "has to start with yourself." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Then maybe this is how I start." We stood in silence, the wind carrying the distant sound of sirens through the night. The next day, Navarro drove us to the Bureau's downtown field office for the handover. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension agents moving with purpose, phones ringing, a sense that something was about to break. Navarro led us to a secure conference room. "All right," she said, closing the door behind us. "This is it. The data goes in, and the Bureau takes over." I placed the small drive on the table. For a moment, no one moved. Then Navarro picked it up and slid it into the encrypted reader. The monitor flickered to life. Files loaded one by one, chemical formulas, transfer records, test results. It was all there. Proof of what we had built and what others had weaponized. Navarro exhaled slowly. "This is it," she said. "You've just exposed an international operation." But before relief could settle, the building lights flickered. The screen glitched. The files began disappearing line by line. "What's happening?" I asked. Navarro's assistant swore. "We're being hacked. Someone's wiping the database remotely." Chloe shot to her feet. "It's them." "Argus." Navarro barked orders into her radio. "Lock down the system. Pull the plug." The lights went out completely. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain against the windows and the low hum of emergency power. Then faintly, a voice crackled through the intercom, distorted, mechanical. "You can't bury what built you." The power surged back and the screen was blank. The data gone. Navarro turned to me, eyes blazing. "Do you have another copy?" I shook my head. That was the last one. Chloe's face went white. "We lost it?" "No," I said quietly. "They did." Navarro frowned. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my coat and pulled out a second drive, an identical twin to the first. "You think I'd come this far without a backup?" She stared at it, speechless. Chloe let out a shaky laugh. "You never change, do you?" 40 years in biotech," I said, handing the drive to Navarro. You learn one thing, always duplicate your work. The agents quickly isolated the new drive on an offline terminal, copying the files manually. This time, no interruptions. When it finished, Navarro turned to me with something close to a smile. "It's done. Argus is finished." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Chloe covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking not from fear, but from release. Navarro placed a hand on my arm. "You should both disappear for a while. A new identity, new lives. The Bureau will handle the rest." I nodded. "One condition. The Helios name makes sure it's cleared." "You have my word." When we left the building, the storm had finally broken. The sun was rising over the Potomac, painting the city in gold and pale blue. It was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes after surviving something that should have killed you. We walked along the river, the air cold and clean. Chloe slipped her arm through mine, hesitant, like she was afraid I'd pull away. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Neither did I said. "But we keep living anyway." She smiled faintly, and for a moment I saw the little girl she once was, the one who believed her father could fix anything. Maybe this time she was right. Weeks passed. Argus was dismantled. Navarro called once to tell me the hearings were over and that my testimony had sealed the case. Rhodes would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. Chloe entered a rehabilitation program, this time by choice. She sent letters every week, handwritten, full of questions about her mother, about life before everything went wrong. I wrote back every time. Some wounds take years to close. Some never do. One evening I returned to the lake house, the same place where it had all begun. The air smelled of pine and rain. I walked out to the dock, the water reflecting the stars, and for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Ellen had always believed that truth was the only inheritance worth leaving behind. Looking at that still water, I finally understood what she meant. I wasn't just reclaiming my name. I was reclaiming the man I used to be. If you've stayed with me through this story, through every betrayal, every twist, every storm, tell me what you think. Would you have done the same in my place? Do you believe redemption is something a person can truly earn? Leave your thoughts below, and if you want to hear more stories like this about family justice and the price of truth, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms, they're fought within the heart. And those are the stories worth remembering.